Hi, can everyone hear me? Yes, great. All right, so welcome to our panelists. I'm really excited to have this conversation and see where it goes about health and mental health and wellness. So why don't we just go down the line, and if you could just tell us your name, where you work, and how long you've been there, and also give us a little bit of your 10-second version of your self-care routine. So why don't we start with you, Matt?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Matt Jackson. I'm from Unmind, based here in New York. I founded our US operations in April of 2020 and have been here ever since. My self-care routine, so for the first 45 minutes of my day, I don't look at a screen. So alarm goes off, shower, drink, go outside, and then I'll pick up my phone, and it just helps me kind of level myself before getting into the madness of a day.
All right. Hello, everyone. Chad Deschler. I work for LifeSpeak. We're based in Toronto, Canada, and been there for about 3 years now. In terms of self-care for me, mine's probably a little bit different than that. Every day after work, I have to go and I box. So that is my self-care. I don't know if it's helping me out, but I enjoy it.
Okay. My name is Peter Johnson. I'm the Senior Vice President for Talent and Culture at NRG Energy. We're headquartered in Houston, Texas. I've been with the company for 12 years. 10-second self-care, I would say that each morning I try to practice some form of gratitude. I like to just think about some positive aspect, something to be grateful for. It sort of helps me start the day off right.
Oh, I love the gratitude aspect. I'm Diana Blanconi. I'm the Chief People Officer for Omnicom Media Group. We're a global media agency. I've been there for 4 years. I'm based in New York. I struggle with this one, but it used to be long runs, and now I would say it's most mornings a 5-minute sprint or some sort of a Pilates stretching mindful session.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Amy Onori. I am the SVP of Talent Acquisition for Publicis Media Shared Services Division. So I work in the same industry as Diana, from what you just heard. I have been in my role and at Publicis for now approaching 4.5 years, but I've been in this industry now for what feels like forever, but only about 15 years. My self-care routine every morning, no exception, is 5-minute meditation as soon as I wake up. Whether it's YouTube or Peloton, I do make the first 5 minutes, gotta meditate and start out my day on the right foot.
Excellent, thank you. I'm gonna have to try boxing as well, I think. Yeah. All right, so let's get right into it. So a lot has changed since the pandemic, when companies really were prioritizing health and wellness benefits. And there's been a backlash today as we've been moving farther away from that time, as critics question their effectiveness, and that's also coinciding with this resurgence that we're seeing in hustle culture and just a lot of general uncertainty about the economic situation in the world today, where people are really desperate to hang on to their jobs. So I'd love to hear from the panelists about, where do health and wellness programs fit into that landscape today? Where are we with them right now? And Matt, you're closest to me, sorry, so I'll start with you.
Sure. Unmind's a mental health platform, and as I mentioned, we opened our US operations in April of 2020. So I often reflect upon this question, kind of comparing pandemic times to today. I think, and hindsight's a wonderful thing, but if we reflect back to 2020, there was definitely an amplified focus on health and wellness, which is a good thing. There was a big growth in single point solutions being thrown at employees. And speaking from, I guess, the vendor side of the room here, there were many, many people coming inbound to Unmind or LifeSpeak or whoever it may be saying, how can you help us? How can you help us? We have budget for this. We have budget for this. And I think what happened is there wasn't as much intention with the solutions that were being launched to employees, which meant there was low utilization. I read somewhere that of 10,000 health and wellness apps that are available to individuals, only 5% were backed by science, so it led to kind of low quality experiences. And employees were overwhelmed. You think of just the number of solutions that are available, but it was also, hey, fix yourself, help yourself, make yourself more resilient. You do this. It's like self. And employees over a couple of years said, let's stop it. This is too much. So I think, how does it look like today? And speaking from our side, a lot of the conversations now are far more strategy-based. So it's helped me think through being more intentional about what we roll out and why we roll it out and how we measure for it. The second big thing would be consolidation. I think we're going from 5, 6, 7 single point solutions to consolidating that to a more simple user experience and consolidating through vendors. And then I think the third thing is it's not all about self. So there's a lot more focus on leaders, a lot more focus on teams, and a lot more focus on organization, because you could have the best solutions in the world, but if your boss sucks and your culture is toxic, it's wasted spend. So I'd say that's the biggest changes we've been seeing.
Yeah, I 100% agree with what he just said right there. I would add one other thing that we've seen is there was, like he mentioned during COVID and prior to that, funds that were being dumped in and let's go invest in our people. Now I think that what we're seeing is companies are now stepping back and saying, what am I really trying to solve for in the future? What are the business needs that I need to solve for? And I think that's become more apparent now than ever before. And maybe the business need doesn't include some of the things I did pre-pandemic. Maybe the business need is really not just one thing. Maybe it is multiple things, or maybe it is one. So I'm seeing more strategy there, and definitely just deciding and being very thoughtful with what they're trying to solve for. The second thing I would say is there's self-care, like we all do and participate in. And then I think there is what has to go in conjunction with that is what are you doing as an organization to help drive culture change that can help support some of these self-care things. We have various programs, wellness initiatives that are deployed, but if there's not the infrastructure and support system around that, they're gonna fall flat. And I think a lot of folks in the room, and I myself have seen that happen.
Great.
So long-term thinking, I think, is one thing that's changed.
Thank you.
You know, you mentioned backlash, and I think over the past few years, there has been some backlash, and candidly, some of it rightly deserved. And I think the companies that really are feeling the backlash are companies that put in programs or solutions that really, at the end of the day, were just window dressing. I need to put something in to say I put something in. Think, here's a free meditation app, good luck. So it's those types of things that I think are gonna draw the backlash. But so for at NRG, for example, we really started to think about years ago, even before the pandemic, a holistic well-being point of view. And so we think about it in 4 different perspectives. There's the social, there's the mental, there's the physical, and the financial. And we think about all of them together holistically in conjunction with our strong safety culture. So we think about safety, well-being together. Additionally, we really focus on communication, specifically from the top down. So last month, May, as many people know, was Mental Health Awareness Month. So we had a panel discussion with employees about mental health. And so one of the panelists was our general counsel. And he got up and on the panel spoke very passionately about his own journey with mental health. And he was genuine and he was vulnerable. And that really resonated with our employees to hear senior leaders talk about that. So really, at the end of the day, to avoid that backlash, you really have to have programs that meet the needs of your employees, they're authentic, and you're leading from the top, by example.
Just one comment there. I think the programs are absolutely key, and we've all done a lot of work in that space to revolutionize what we're doing. But that top-down influence and just leading by example and encouraging people to have balance and have flexibility, I think is really where we've seen the most change over the past couple of years, is that encouraging that balance and encouraging that well-being by quite frankly, leading by example.
I think it's a lot about authenticity, and I think that with the new generation of employees and the new wave of employees, the pandemic with everyone being at home and having to work remotely, all you have is a camera. So how are you going to collaborate with your peers at a junior or mid-level is being authentic. But they're also looking at you as a leader, whether it's on the business or whether it's on the talent side, that they're looking for you to, be yourself and also let your team be themselves, and that's where the authenticity comes into play. And I do think that it's just about leaning into your people and like letting them lead you, knowing what will drive them to have like the most well-being possible. So for example, even today, the weather's pretty miserable outside, and commuting and taking time to be in the office, it can be a lot for people, especially post-pandemic, getting people back into the office. So just little things, telling your team member, hey, if you need to leave early to catch it, an off-peak train or bus or ferry, go do that. Sign back on if you need to get work done. But it's about building that trust and the authenticity with your employees, whether it is on the business or on the talent side. So I think authenticity and flexibility.
I was going to ask for an example of what does leading by example look like? And I think it's hard, it might be hard for a lot of employees to, kind of point their bosses in the direction of, hey, this will help me if you kind of let me know this or signal something to me that this is okay or not okay. So what does that actually look like?
I think it really, just being honest with them. So, even today, I do have the opportunity to manage quite a junior team, and it's very, very interesting to me, like the things that they want. They want permission, and they want the opportunity, to say like, hey, this is okay, or and I really just instill you don't need to ask for a hall pass to go to the bathroom. You're an adult. You were hired to do a job. You go home when you feel like you need to, and sign back on. We have a computer for a reason. So to your point, Corinne, even what I told my team, listen, I have to go off site. If you need to leave early to catch whatever train or mode of transportation, please feel free to go home. You don't need to stay here and sit here until 5 p.m. just for optics. So again, it really is about leadership and telling and reinforcing to your team, this is okay. I have your back. Because I do think that and noticing them through the years that they get so worried that if they leave at 4 o'clock that it's going to look bad. Right. And to me, that it doesn't matter as long as the work's getting done.
I think showing them too that you're comfortable doing it. So us leaving at 5 o'clock or us not working all hours of the night and answering emails all hours of the night and just actually doing what we're telling them to do and leading by example by doing it helps.
Big plus one on that. Our CEO is based in London, and he always has kids' bedtime in his calendar, and that's a no-go time, even though he's a CEO and a co-founder of a mental health startup. So when I saw that, and over time, I thought, well, I can do that then. And he respected that. And I think Thursday, for example, my 6-year-old graduates kindergarten at 9 a.m. and my 8-year-old has her bridging ceremony for brownies, which is new to me, at 3:45. And they're things in my calendar. So people don't kind of book around it. But I felt permission to do that because it came from the very top of the company.
Yeah, and even little things, at the bottom of my signature, what I incorporated over the past year is I put a well-being notice. And it's basically just a disclaimer, just because I'm sending this at a time that works for me doesn't mean that you are required to be sending this at a time that works for you. And my team really loved that. Because again, there are certain things that I do have to respond to late at night, and other people are CC'd, and the last thing I want to do is make them feel that oh my gosh, I have to respond at 10 p.m. at night. No, it's just, again, bedtime's important to me as a mother of a young child. So sometimes I sign back online, and that's just what works for me. And reinforcing that to my team has been received very well, because they don't feel I have to leave my happy hour that I'm at with my friends to go and check my email from my SVP.
Right. Great. Thank you for all answering that. Amy, your company, Publicis, brings in health and wellness even before candidates are even hired or there's a hiring decision that's made. Can you talk about the thought process behind that, and also what is Publicis trying to message out to its candidates about how it perceives health and wellness at that company?
Sure. So specifically, since we really do hire a majority at mid-level. So when I say mid-level, probably 3 to 8 years of experience. And when looking at that level, like what matters to them, when not just about the role or the title or the compensation, all of those things are obviously important, but it's the whole package. So a lot of the things that my recruiters on my team and myself will talk to candidates about is our Work Your World program. So it gives them the opportunity to work from anywhere in the entire world, for lack of better words, once you've hit certain qualifications. And it allows them the flexibility to say, wow, I'm going to go and explore France for the month, or I'm going to explore California, and the office is there. And that's been, supremely awesome as a selling point, number one. But number two, it gives, I would say, well-being, like just a different take. We obviously have wellness reimbursements that once you're hired, you can submit for at any level, and that can go towards anything from like a massage or meditation or Pilates. But I think having multiple options that aren't specifically in this like therapy and self-care category has really been helpful to external candidates, because wellness means a lot of different things to people. Yeah. So I think just having that versatility and variety has
So
been
it's almost
great.
like it's a recruiting tool, almost.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think now more and more we're seeing that it is that compensation that gets them excited about the role, but what really closes the deal for them is their balance and their well-being and what's in it for them. So what does the time off look like? What do the soft benefits look like? We see more and more that candidates are digging in, and employees too obviously are very much fixated on that aspect of the role.
Yeah, I would agree with that entirely. We're very focused on well-being as a part of the total compensation, the total rewards package. But exactly to your point, it's really about the culture of well-being and what it's going to be like to come work at the company. So we put our entire list of all of our benefits, all of our programs out on the internet. You can go look at it. It's energypowerup.com. Don't look at it now. But we put it out there, and we allow candidates, anybody, to take a look at it so that they can really get a sense of what it's like to work at Energy and the full suite of benefits that we offer, because we do think that's an important recruiting tool as well.
Great. All right, so employee surveys have been around since pretty much the dawn of the modern workplace. And I think we all know that why employees might be suspicious of them, suspicious of how they're used. So what does the employee survey, what should it look like? And how should companies be thinking about the survey today? And I'll start with you, Peter, since that's something you guys are thinking about at NRG.
There is a perception out there that employee survey fatigue is real. I don't know that I agree with that. I think it's a little bit different. I think about it more as poor survey execution. That's what employees are tired of. So you can get employees to take a survey all day, every day, if you follow three things. And number one is ask relevant and actionable questions. So don't go ask your employees, well, what do you think about our return to work policy? If once you get the results, you're not going to make any changes whatsoever to the policy. Number two, communicate transparently the results of the survey. The good and the bad, be very open about that, as well as specifically what are the actions that you're going to take as a result of the survey. And number three, and this is certainly the most important one, is do what you say you're going to do. If you say that you're going to take action as a result of the survey, take the action. So at NRG, we also use the survey for an additional purpose. So as part of our engagement survey, we ask a lot of questions, some of them around well-being, so those 4 pillars I talked about earlier. And the results of that, we compile into a composite well-being score from 0 to 5. And this is really intended to provide us with an indication of the sentiment, how people are feeling, what their well-being is at the company. We compare that score to prior surveys scores, and the result of that, whether it's better or worse than prior scores, directly impacts the size of our annual bonus pool, up or down. So we really put our money where our mouth is as it pertains to surveys and well-being. And so the last thing I would say about surveys is that we do 2 engagement surveys a year, one in the spring, one in the fall. So we just completed the spring engagement survey. We asked employees 66 questions Took them about 20 minutes each to complete the survey. We had 85% participation among our 18,000 employees. So we know that surveys work as long as you ask the right questions, you communicate the results, and you follow through.
Can I ask a quick follow-up, Peter?
Sure.
What's one example of something you changed, the company changed?
What are some of the things I think the biggest thing we changed over the past number of years, well, one, the introduction of the survey results into the incentive plan. That was a big change that we did a couple years ago. But the other is really digging into how do we communicate quickly the results back to employees, and how do we then take the information in aggregate and get it out to our leaders so that they can start to take action.
I guess I ment once you got the feedback, what was one of the major things that was changed? That's okay.
So, we heard that people love the development programs that we're putting in place. So we introduced LinkedIn Learning. We introduced a lot of different development opportunities for employees. So they love that, but what they came back and told us was, we don't know where to start. Like, great that you're throwing a bunch of learning out to us, but how do we even begin? So as a response to that, we actually developed this software, this program, that allows you to go in and indicate, here's who I am, here's my level, I'm interested in getting a promotion, or I'm interested in learning more about what I do today, I'm interested in moving into a different part of the company, and then it basically guides the employee through, here are resources that would be best for you to help you guide you through your career. So we were very responsive to that feedback, and we've got really positive responses from the introduction of that, what we call the Career Development Launchpad.
Great, thanks. Chad, do you have
I would add one. I had a little grin on my face when you were giving that example, because it reminded me in the early 2000s, everyone probably remembers when you would submit or release the health risk assessment. And it would, one of the questions, how many drinks do you have a day or a week? And it's like, oh, 0. And everyone, it was the notorious, I'm gonna lie about that survey. And then I think about the surveys you're talking about, and you're exactly right. It's, people are not excited about doing it. So I love the tips he just gave right there. The one thing I would say that's an underlying theme in all of it, it reminds me like with your spouse or partner, and you have this discussion or an argument, and when you finally settle and the dust settles, if you just would have said sorry, that's all I needed to hear. It made me think about just being transparent. And I think that's, in summation, what you're saying is what I've noticed is as things happen within an organization, within health, wellness, compensation changes, whatever the discussion is, I think what employees need more than anything is just to be transparent, just to be open. Some stuff I understand there may be some confidentiality with discussions and things of that sort, but I think transparency is really important. With my team in particular, I've tried to be as transparent as I can, whether it's good or bad news, and just say, hey, this is what it is. And I think people, generally speaking, really appreciate that, because I think for years that has not been very open. And I think that it goes a real long way. That's the only thing I would add.
Yeah.
That all completely resonates with me. I think just the change that we've seen is that they're looking for answers, they want to see action. So when you're surveying, you have to be transparent about, again, the results, but what are you doing? So one of the things that I've done and we've done as an org is during our company town halls that we do quarterly, we talk about the results, but then we also talk about what we're doing to triage those gaps that we have. And sometimes you're not gonna be able to hit it. You can't do it, right? Return to office was a massive thing for us. We knew that we really couldn't change it, but we talked to them about what can we do to offset some of the feelings that you're experiencing and how could we make this feel better for you? Are there things that we can do to improve the experience? But I think the other key is bringing them on board to solve some of the issues and asking them for some buy-in. So another thing that I've done within the past year is sit down and actually sit with them and do listening sessions and hear from them where the pain points are, and they're done in an intimate manner. So no more than 20 people, they're sharing feedback, but then we're also asking them to contribute to solving the problem and thinking about creative solutions.
So this is staying in a similar vein. I think part of the backlash we were talking about earlier has a lot to do with the fact that it's very hard to measure the effectiveness of these programs. So, I mean, you're speaking a little bit to it about in the transparency, talking about the transparency part, but have we gotten to better ways or more efficient ways of measuring the effectiveness of these programs?
I think we're on the right path to it. I think when you think specifically about health and wellness benefits, one of the challenges is you can often prove correlation, but you can't prove causation, which in the eyes of a CFO, they would typically want, no, show me what you've done has directly caused this. Whereas we know from the human perspective, there's so many different inputs into what makes us feel how we feel and our health, etc. I think a big shift we've seen recently is the measurement of the financial impacts of health and wellness programs. So a lot more people are trying to measure the positive or negative impact on absenteeism, presenteeism, attrition, and of course, kind of healthcare costs. So are my health and wellness programs kind of stemming the tide on my medical inflation or et cetera? But where I've seen some really good creativity with measuring is tying it more to business impact. Or business initiatives, because that catches the ear of the senior executives who need to lead from the top, right? So Carney, who are a management consultancy firm, they've got about 5,000 people globally. They started putting questions about psychological safety and well-being into their project weekly check-ins, so something that every consultant that was billing hours against a particular project would have to answer. And they then started correlating those responses against project success measures like client satisfaction, staying within budget, staying within timeline. And it will become meaningful when it's over a number of years, right? But what they started to see is where there was greater perceived psychological safety, greater perceived well-being, guess what? Projects were done on time, they were done in budget, and clients were happier. So it kind of helped them double down on the well-being initiatives or wellness initiatives that they were putting in place because it was directly impacting business, which was fantastic.
Yeah. I would, so I'll preface this by saying my analogies are horrible, so just bear with me on this. I do feel that as HR leaders, it's kind of like a grilled cheese sandwich. You have pressure from top bread and bottom bread, and the cheese in the middle is getting burned. And what I mean by that in particular is you have executive senior leadership saying, hire the best talent, cut our costs, get the best programs out there, and do it quick. And then you have employees on the bottom side saying, you took away some of my benefits last year, I'm not getting paid enough, and I don't like the survey we just took. Whatever it may be. Right. And so in the middle there, you're kind of caught in between all of this. And I think it is very difficult, and I think you hit it right on the head, the business needs, and I think as executives yourselves, to look at it and to say, how can I really address the needs that are gonna solve long-term retention for my population, because it is very expensive to backfill, very expensive to hire somebody new. And so we know people, the average time they're staying in jobs is 2.5 years at most. And so how do you lengthen that time as much as you can? And I think the more you can start to solve more of the business needs like you alluded to, and not just saying, do I have a health and wellness program, but how does it incorporate everything we do as an organization? That's where that stress starts to be relieved a little bit. It's not a perfect solution, but it starts to provide some relief.
Yeah, if I could add just one thing to that, I think that you're absolutely right, that there are multiple dimensions of measurement that we have to do. It's certainly satisfaction, the employee satisfaction. It is potentially cost reduction if your wellness programs are driving down your healthcare costs. It is absolutely the business impact. I think the one additional one that I would add, and this is a hard one to get across to CFOs or other number of folks, but it's the impact of the program, sometimes which are harder to measure. So an example of that could be a fertility program. So we put an infertility program in place a number of years ago, and we're super proud of the fact that over the past 5 years, we've had about 60 live births successfully through the program, which doesn't sound like a big number, and in the grand scheme, it's not a big number when you have 18,000 employees, but the impact for those employees who receive that benefit is immeasurable. And the retentive nature of that is really, really hard to quantify.
Yeah. That's great. Chad, I'm not sure if that was on purpose, but that segged perfectly into my sandwich generation question. Oh. So caregivers are really stressed right now, obviously. I like the caregiver crunch better than the sandwich generation.
Sorry.
But no. But yeah, we have a lot of people who are taking care of, elderly parents and relatives at the same time that they're also taking care of young children. So really, Chad, how do the companies you work with acknowledge the role of caretakers, and what are you seeing in that space?
It's such an interesting topic. I mean, some statistics that I know offhand, if you look at it, about 60% of all caregivers in particular are female. And of the caretakers that are female, about 35 to 40% are leaving the workforce because they don't feel supported as a caregiver. So what's the impact of that? If you look at claims spend, the differential between what you're spending on individuals that are caregivers and what they're having to do to caregive is roughly 7 to 8% higher in claims costs than somebody who's not a caregiver. So there's a significant investment, there's a lot of cost to somebody who's a caregiver, and people are leaving the workforce, so you're backfilling and all of those things. So what does that mean? It simply means it's important as a caregiver, you're supporting somebody who may be an elderly parent. You're also supporting potentially a child, and that's most people in this room on both ends of the spectrum that may need that support. I think it's very important that as an organization, you provide support for the caregiver. Not to say that people who are being caregived for are not important, because that is very important, but when you're not focusing on the person providing that care and providing an environment, creating an environment for them to be successful, they will leave the workforce. It will be hard to get that talent back. And so how and what are you doing to support that individual? Are you providing them content and resources available to them to make better decisions? Because if you think about it, you now have hybrid workforces, remote workforces, that are saying, if I come to the office, I now am finding childcare for somebody who's an 8-year-old autistic child who's struggling to make friends in school, and I don't know how to raise somebody who's struggling with that challenge. I've also got a 78-year-old parent that's struggling with dementia. How can I focus on the reports that I have to turn into my boss on Friday? That's a reality. And so I think that there needs to be some focused support on the caregiver themselves, and I think that's a very important thing by providing those type of resources for them. They're staggering statistics, and I think that it can go a long way by addressing some of those things.
And I didn't mention that it does disproportionately affect women, so I do want to hear from Diana and Amy as well on this. If you guys have something.
I think one of the beautiful things that came out of the pandemic was the ability to understand what somewhat of a balance and a quality of life looks like. And then I think the one thing that we haven't really truly acknowledged is that we've completely flip-flopped the world and expect it to go back to that jar that it was in pre-pandemic. So I think one of the things that we talked about earlier was leading by example and showing your team members. I think programs are absolutely essential, but leading by example and being that leader who encourages people by doing it for themselves, by creating boundaries, right? So I know a lot of people block out their calendars at night and say, well, no, I've got to get to the kids' games, I've got to get to the softball game, and I know myself included, I've been more vocal about saying, hey, I've got my daughter's game, I'm gonna run out at this time to get home at this time, but I think just encouraging people to have that balance and still find time for wellness, whether it's cutting out in the middle of the day, blocking time on their calendar, but doing that in a grassroots way outside of the programs, I think can go a long way as well.
Amy, do you have anything?
I think it's really just about being flexible. Again, I think every single employee is different. Similar to what I spoke about earlier, what matters to one person is completely different than what matters to another. And it's really about leadership, in my opinion, and understanding what motivates them, what kind of flexibility are they looking for? Are they looking to log off early, sign back on later? Or are they looking for a lot of PTO? Are they looking for, just to take more PTO than usual because they have an unusual circumstance or because they're going through something? And I really think the onus, yes, the programs are important and the awareness is important, but that's going to fall on deaf ears if your employee does not trust their leader that they have their best interest in mind, knowing that they are a caregiver, knowing that they have other responsibilities. And, I'm very vocal and open. Again, bedtime is very important to me that, and my team knows, hey, between the hours of 4:45 and 7, Amy's usually not available unless it's an emergency, but they also know that I will sign back online. So again, and they know that because it's a level of trust and transparency that I provide to them, which I think, coupled with all the programs and offerings that Publicis has, really enables them to show up and be their best selves and work at a time that works for them while still adhering to all of our policies.
Great. Thank you all for those great answers. So obviously a lot has changed, as we said before, since the pandemic and pre-pandemic, and a lot of progress looks like taking a few steps forward and then a lot of steps back. So is mental health less stigmatized now than it was before the pandemic? And does Gen Z have anything to do with it?
I think it depends on your company. Right? It depends on your company, it depends on your leadership, and we work with a lot of law firms, and I think that's where we see the biggest disparity in whether mental health is still very stigmatized or not. And there was a phrase I learned that I didn't coin, so don't attribute it to me, but when talking about leadership at law firms, if there is still the stale, pale, male layer of leadership at a law firm, you are far more likely to see higher levels of mental health stigma and lower investment in well-being, mental health. So where you are starting to see the next generation of leaders come into leadership positions of managing partners at law firms, they're the firms that are reaching out and listening a lot more and putting forward a lot more innovative or meaningful benefit programs and mental health support. And to kind of talk about the generational element there, my kids at 6 and 8 learn about mental health in school. In universities and colleges, there are mental health integrated throughout. So what you're seeing is an expectation of today's workforce to provide me with the same openness and same conversation and same resources around mental health. So I think it's going to continue to get better and better, but unfortunately there still does exist that stale, pale, male-esque leadership in certain organizations.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I absolutely agree. So we were talking about our kids backstage, and I have 3 adult daughters in their 20s, and their generation has a very different view about mental health and talking about mental health than does mine. They have an expectation to talk about it. And so it really is incumbent on us to ensure that we have that conversation with our employees all throughout. So I talked about our general counsel earlier. He is a stale, pale male, but he got up and he talked about this stuff. And that's important for people to hear from those voices about mental health. And then also throughout the organization. So a number of years ago, we partnered with the National Council for Wellbeing, and we've put hundreds of our employees through mental health first aid training. So some of you may be aware of that, but if you're not, it is a training program that allows you to put your employees through where they learn how to be aware of and be on the lookout for and identify signs of mental health crisis in other employees and their colleagues. And then they're trained not to diagnose, not to try to do anything, other than direct them to the resources that the company makes available for them to get the help that they need. So it really is about all levels throughout the organization, really starting to talk about it throughout the organization. That's kind of how you reduce the stigma.
I think, too, highlighting the benefits, right? We've started to do benefit sessions monthly where we're just educating the employees on the benefits that we offer and that we have. Some of them are somewhat buried or hidden, but even, psychiatrist visits and therapy or mindfulness vendors that we have, whether it's calm meditation or whatnot, just talking about these things more so they're aware. I think that we still struggle where employees don't necessarily feel comfortable. They feel like they're going to lose their job if they come forward and take a break. But the more that we can talk about it and check in, I'm just one of the mindset, check in and see how people are doing, how they're feeling. I think measuring burnout, seeing if people are working all hours of the night, right? Noticing those things too. And just, again, as that leader or colleague, just encouraging people to take some time for themselves as well.
Great. Yeah. In our last few minutes here, I want to make sure I ask about this because I think it's really important and it ties into what we're talking about here about burnout. How are these benefits programs evolving as we get kind of pummeled constantly with like a chaotic, to make an understatement, chaotic news cycle, and with people feeling, such strong feelings about what's going on in the world and, very polarizing, viewpoints and situations and conflicts, feeling of conflict, just really big feelings, right? So how can these programs and how can the leaders behind them address that? Is that even fair to ask?
Yeah, no, I think it's fair. I had a conversation with my kids last week about control what you can control. Everything else is very difficult. There's so much noise out there, and we get caught up in what could have, should have, would have. And it's just control what you can control. And I think that's applicable here. When you think about the programs that organizations have and deployed, there's so much, quote, noise that's out there. A lot of the stress that's happening locally here, all over the country, everywhere you talk about it, it's just a lot of noise. And I think sometimes it's good to step back and to say, we all learn in different ways. We all absorb information in different ways. And sometimes people don't need a full-blown program, so to speak, to get through a challenge. Sometimes it's just, I need to watch a 30-second video on how to decompress. Or maybe I just need to separate myself and get away from everyone here for 5 minutes and go backstage and relax. I don't know what that is, but I think that it comes back to simplification, and we all learn in different ways. And understanding that, I think, will go a long way.
Yeah, I think in many ways, yes, this is a very chaotic time, but in some respects, we've been here before, right? There's always been stress and anxiety in all of our employees' lives, and so in some respects, this isn't that different. And I think that Amy talked about this quite a bit, and I think it really is the leading by example. It's leadership showing up, and it's leadership saying, it's okay, and I'm going to help you get through this, because people look to their leaders, and so it really is important to get leadership behind the support that employees need.
Does anyone else have anything? I guess in terms of seeing employees bring outside stress to work and leading by example, I guess, how does this kind of exchange happen? How can it happen? What can it look like?
I think that it really happens by the leaders exhibiting the behaviors that they want their employees to exhibit. So again, so for example, I just got back from vacation on Friday, and I said, don't call me. I won't call you. So I think setting that example and saying, I trust you. I trust my team that everything is going to happen. Like if the place is burning down, okay, maybe send me a text, but otherwise, I trust you. And so it's really demonstrating those behaviors that you want your employees to reflect.
All right, I want to thank all the panelists here for sharing your insights and expertise. Appreciate it.